Hey guys, what's up? I'm Erin and welcome back to the channel. How am I doing? I feel like that's a question we often ask ourselves, and it's no different in the area of finances. We want to feel like we're getting better and that we're improving over time. But in part of that constantly trying to get better over time, sometimes we don't take a moment to notice that there are actually areas where we're doing quite well. And I know it's cliche, but there's a lot of truth to that saying. It's not the destination, it's the journey. You're not just successful when you hit a certain point, but you're successful as you make progress towards your ultimate goals. So keeping that in mind, what are some ways that you're winning with money? I made a quick checklist, and I feel like if you're hitting these, you can count yourself as doing well with your finances. You have an emergency fund. Every year, Bankrate runs a survey to see how equipped people feel to handle unexpected emergencies. And every year, the results are pretty grim. This year was no exception. Only 43% of people said that they would be able to handle an unexpected $1,000 emergency. The remaining 56% said they would have to borrow the funds from somewhere or just resort to putting it on a credit card that they would have to delay paying off. And that's a tough situation to be in because unexpected expenses tend to pop up. And maybe that's not all that surprising, being that 63% of people report living paycheck to paycheck. However, while I absolutely do believe there are a significant number of people truly living paycheck to paycheck, I think you have to take that stat with a bit of a grain of salt, because if you do a deep dive into that stat, you find that there are people who are saying they're living paycheck to paycheck, but then they're actually contributing, say, 20 or 25% towards their investments. And they say they're living paycheck to paycheck simply because after they've set aside savings and investing, there's not much left. So I think you have to take it a bit with a grain of salt. So if you have an emergency fund, and everyone's emergency fund will look different, maybe it's 3 months, maybe it's 6 months, maybe it's more. If you have an emergency fund, count yourself as being on good financial footing. I think having an emergency fund is essential to making sure that you and your family are protected. And I think it's actually one of the very first things you want to set up when you get started on your financial journey. And if you don't have one, it's time to create a plan. It's time to start taking steps to actually build one. Are there areas where you can cut back on your expenses? Do you have to work on boosting your income? Find ways to set something aside. You don't have to stress and be like, oh my gosh, I have to have it fully funded by tomorrow, but you do actively want to be making progress towards funding it and getting it all set up. You have no other debt other than a mortgage. I feel like there should be an asterisk next to this one, and that being student loans. Because depending on your area of study, student loans may have been a necessary means to an end. Anytime you're taking on any type of debt, you want to make sure that this is a necessary debt and make sure that it's a debt burden that you can actually handle. But if you have student loans, a good rule of thumb is to get those paid off within 10 years of graduating. Debt can be a big obstacle when it comes to building wealth. The more debt you have, the less you can take your money and put it to work for you. So I like to try and avoid all debt other than a mortgage, especially early on in the career. But realistically, most people have other types of debt. 85% of car purchases in America are financed, and the most common loan length, 72 months or 6 years. But 2/3 of people replace their car within 5 years or less from the purchase date. So that means there are a lot of people out there who are never without a car payment. I remember when I worked at one office, I was there for over a decade, and I kid you not, every single coworker had at least 2 or 3 new cars in the time I was there. My coworkers would actually say to me, when are you gonna get a new car? Because I never bought a new one while working there. And I was just like, well, I'm driving mine until it dies. Because to me, a car, it just has to get me someplace safely. And as long as it's running, as long as it's safe, I'm happy. My car turns 15 this year and it's still going strong. 35% of Americans carry credit card debt. Nearly half rely on credit cards to make ends meet each month. 15% have been in credit card debt for over 15 years. Credit card debt is wildly expensive. The interest rate can vary from, say, 12% all the way up to 36%. You simply can't be in credit card debt and hope to build a bright financial future. Credit cards can be a great tool, but they have to be paid off in full every single month. Carrying debt is definitely a norm in our society, so much so that according to Experian, only 25% of adults can actually say that they are completely debt-free. But keep in mind that that stat does include being mortgage-free as well. So keep your debt burden low. It is absolutely a great gateway to building a brighter financial future. You live below your means. The only way to achieve financial freedom is to live below your means, which may not be the easiest thing to do in today's media and socially driven society. It can be so easy to get caught up in the idea that you have to buy the latest and greatest whatever it is. It's said that the average person sees anywhere from 4,000 to 10,000 ads per day. Honestly, that number is kind of unfathomable, but hey, you probably saw an ad before you saw this video. We're glued to our devices all day long, and it's nonstop ads, and these ads are personalized. They're personalized by the very things we're searching on this device. I'll Google something or I'll look something up on Amazon, and then inevitably for the next 4 weeks, those are the ads I see. It makes it hard not to buy. Then we live in a time where the typical new home costs almost $350,000. The average new car, over $48,000. And all the while, the median household income is just $70,000. So if you fall into these average categories, you bought the typical home, you buy the average car, and you have that median household income, it can be incredibly hard to live below your means. And if you don't live below your means, you can't work towards financial freedom. It's simply not possible. So you have to know your budget. You have to know what you have to work with. And speaking of that, you follow a budget or track your expenses. Only about a third of households actually follow a budget. And while I love a good budget, I don't think that it's essential that everyone follow a strict budget. Because if you have everything in your financial life set on autopilot, like your savings and investments, those are automatically withdrawn and the contributions go where they should. If your expenses are covered, then you can kind of sit back and just track your expenses throughout the month. I think that approach is okay too. I love a good detailed spreadsheet. But also just sitting back and tracking your expenses, that works in my book too. Because it makes sure today is covered, those expenses. It makes sure your future is taken care of, your contributions are going where they should. So it makes sure that your essentials are covered. And not everyone enjoys getting into the daily nitty-gritty details, and that's okay. There's room for everyone here in personal finance. But I think a bigger issue comes into play when you see stats like 65% of Americans have no idea what they spent last month. If you want to improve with your finances, you have to know what's happening with your money, at least on the most basic levels. What's coming in, how much is coming in, and where is it going? Building wealth and working towards financial freedom is a very deliberate process. Most people don't just stumble onto financial independence, but there are millions of people who feel ill-equipped to step away from the workforce, to actually go into retirement. And that's the whole goal of this personal financial journey, to not have to one day rely on a job, to have the choice to work or to not work. And that doesn't happen by ignoring your finances. And feeding right off that previous one, you have money goals. According to Charles Schwab Modern Wealth Survey, only 33% of people have a written financial plan. And it's so easy to simply not write down our plan. But writing it down makes it real. It makes it more likely to happen. And the biggest reason people say they don't write down their financial plan, not having enough money to have a plan, not having enough time to make a plan, or it simply seems too complicated to do. It absolutely does not have to be perfect, but I would highly recommend writing down your goals. I've been writing down my goals for years. I would write things like when I wanted to hit certain financial milestones, or when I wanted to be able to buy my first home, how much I wanted to give to causes I care about, when I wanted to hit financial freedom, and what that freedom would look like to me. And keep in mind, I've been doing this since my late teenage years, and when I was writing goals in my 20s, they're very different than the goals I would write nowadays in my mid-30s. Your goals will change over time, and that's totally fine. I still have my first goal book. I did it when I was 16 or 17 years old, and one of my goals was to get an Audi TT by the time I was 30. But life went on, and I realized how unimportant that goal is in relation to all my other goals. So no, I never bought an Audi. So I would say write down your goals, then work backwards. Work on a plan that can help you achieve them. For example, how much do you have to set aside every single month to make this goal happen? Is that achievable with your current income? If it's not, do you have a plan for growing your income? With a plan in place, you are far more likely to be successful. And certainly don't worry about making it perfect. Fully expect that over time your goals will change. For instance, today you may have your heart set on retiring early at, say, the age of 50. But then years go by, you turn 50, maybe you have no interest in retiring. Maybe you love what you do. Fully expect that your life and your mindset will change over time. I think if you hit all of these, you're on pretty good financial footing. You're actually doing far better than average. Are there any that you would add to the list? Let me know in a comment down below. I post new videos every single week. If you got anything at all out of this one, please give it a like. If you're new here, please consider subscribing, or if you know of someone who might get something out of this type of content, please consider sharing. I'll see you soon. Bye.